to another episode of the Big Game Hunters. I'm Mike.
And I'm Tom. Today we're going to review Hey, That's My Fish. But first we have Chit Chat.
That's right. In today's Chit Chat, we're going to be talking about parts of the breakdown in more detail. Today we're going to be going over abstraction and immersion and strategy and tactics. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Chit Chat. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at some of the elements of our breakdown. We're going to be giving some examples and some ideas about what gives these games the attributes we ascribe to them. Today, specifically, we're going to be looking at abstraction and immersion and strategy and tactics. So, Tom, I think today we'll open with abstraction.
Yes, I think we should. So I think we can all agree that abstraction exists in just about every game. Games inherently are abstractions of whatever scenario or thing that they are representing. Mm-hmm. We use abstraction a little bit differently because we're talking about how elements of the game that sort of pull you out of that scenario. Mm-hmm. Agree?
I do. Also, games that don't really have a life event they're trying to emulate. You know, games like Lost Cities, which we're going to talk about. Well, no, I guess that does a little bit. Loco. We'll take a look at Loco probably. And Loco, just colors and numbers.
That's by definition an abstract game. Mm-hmm. Games that don't depict a life event. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, that's right. And they are sometimes also distinct, though, from abstract strategy games, which are almost universally tile-based kind of spatial reasoning games. So things like Ingenious, Blockus, Chess, Go, those would all be what we think of traditional abstract strategy games. Mm-hmm. So what do you think gives, I guess, how are we going to codify what makes a game abstract? How do you think that why do we give games such a high abstraction scores?
Well, I know when we're doing the breakdown, the thing I generally consider when we're talking about abstraction is theme. I know we've argued back and forth that I probably shouldn't, but when I'm doing abstraction, I think of the elements of the game that are interesting to play or that pull me into the scene of the game.
Tell you a story.
Yeah. So the fewer of those or the less compelling those are, the higher abstract score I get. Mm-hmm. So I guess I sort of look at it as the opposite of immersion for the game. So I guess generally when we're doing the breakdowns, I will establish an immersion level and then just fill in the opposite. Mm-hmm. What about you?
I think we agree more than we may have thought because I do the same. I think I always start with immersion, think about how engaged I am with any kind of story the game's trying to tell, and then, I think I followed exactly the same formula. In terms of abstraction, do you enjoy abstract games more than immersive games? Is there something, do you want a certain level? Is there a score in the breakdown you're aiming for in a game?
No, I almost exclusively enjoy immersive games. I'm not sure why. I guess because it feels a little easier to relate to the game. If I'm part of the game, if I'm immersed in it, the mechanics of it, how to optimize it and all that just sort of flow more naturally for me.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big time Ameritrash fan. Euro games tend to have higher abstraction. Even I think when they're going for some sort of theme, it's a little thinner. There are exceptions. I think Agricola does a pretty good job with theming. But for the most part, it's there, but it's not strong. It's not the driving factor. When we went to Metatopia, mm-hmm. James Ernest gave the quote from Rana Knizia, mm-hmm. saying, yes, theme is very important, so much so that I changed it several times before I finished with the game. But I really like his games, and so I don't have a problem with games being abstract, by definition. But usually there's just those, oh wow moments of immersion, which we'll get to in a second. So is there anything else for abstraction? Is there? Good?
Well, I think for abstraction, when I do want to consider it separate from immersion, mm-hmm. I do look at things. You mentioned tiles earlier. I do look at how the mechanics of the game work together. Like, are they representing anything for the theme or something like that? And a lot of times, you again mentioned tiles. Something like tiles seem to be a real abstract sort of way. I'm not sure if that's
no. I know what you mean. And so, and again, we looked at a few weeks ago. Seasons has pretty high abstraction, but I really enjoy it because the mechanics are so strong that even though it really doesn't represent much, there's such a cool internal economy to that game.
Yeah.
And there's such clean mechanics. I think that's really what I like about abstract games. Games with higher abstraction, they don't have to, but they tend to have much cleaner mechanics. They tend to be a lot more elegantly designed.
It's true that the games that are immersive do seem to rely on that theming element to sort of to sell them, and I think that is a quality of Ameritrash games.
Yeah. I mean, my number one favorite game, Epic Duels, I think, it is very immersive, but it has those really clean mechanics. So it can be done with immersion, but it usually comes along with abstraction.
So speaking of immersion, what other elements besides just the theme, are there any that you consider when thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I do think of theme and immersion as being a little bit separate. So I'm glad you brought that up, because when we're rating something on the scale, I'm not thinking specifically of theme. I'm thinking of how much I'm pulled into the game, how much the mechanics of the game, really how many oh wow moments I get when I'm playing. Those kind of just a game we're going to look at later, Star Trek Fleet Captains. When I'm playing that, the first time I played it, I got a card that was representing the Nexus from Star Trek Generations. And the card moves across the board. You can chase it, but it destroys you when you do, but it gives you points. That, if you've seen the movie, that perfectly captures that element. And there's just something so cool when you get a card like that and say, this immediately makes sense to me. This immediately captures what it's depicting.
So when you say oh wow moment, is that almost always coinciding with swinginess of a game, or is it sometimes not?
No, definitely not. I mean, the Nexus ended up having almost no bearing on the outcome of that game. My opponent chased around a little bit to no avail, and it left the map. It really wasn't a big moment in how the game played out strategically, but it was a big moment in terms of the theme. It really made me feel like...
Of connecting it to Star Trek Generations.
Exactly. It made me feel like I was in the movie in that moment.
What other elements of the game? I can think of... we mentioned before we were talking about luck, where decks are a common element of luck. I think they're also, event decks are a common element of immersion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Generally the way cards are structured, and they almost always have like quotes or flavor text or something on there that can really depict the setting of a game, and how well the cards, like the name or the power of the card, represents the theme of the game. It's also
and I feel like
element.
To add to that, you almost never get an oh wow moment from a straightforward or simplistic card. I'm thinking maybe now Thunderstone. In original Thunderstone, you have Silver Storm. It's a spell that does damage based on how much gold you have in your hand, and it's a little bit more complicated than some of the other cards, say in Dominion, something like just +2 actions, +1 buy. Well, there's not really much to that. It's hard to really, no matter what name you put on that, it's not going to have much of an evocative feel.
Yep.
So I think also, and that's maybe, again, back to why those games aren't as clean, is because to really get those oh wow moments, to really immerse you in a game, there has to be some complicated
you might be putting more weight on the oh wow than on the balance of the game.
Right. So is that all for Immersion Abstraction? Sure. I think that gives our audience a more complete picture of what we're talking about on that scale. And you know what? I think we might want to put strategy and tactics off until next week, actually.
Sounds good.
I think we've gone over a lot with Immersion Abstraction. Is there anything else that we'd like to cover with that?
No. Let's get ready for Hey, That's My Fish.
Okay, sounds great. Now I'm going to teach you how to play Hey, That's My Fish. Hey, That's My Fish is an abstract strategy game depicting penguins moving along a melting ice floe and eating delicious fish. At the end of the game, the player whose penguins have eaten the most fish wins. The game ends when no penguins can make any more legal moves. To set up the game, every player first chooses a color of penguin that he will play. I like red. Then, each player takes a number of penguins based on the number of players in the game. For a 2-player game, each player receives 4 penguins. For a 3-player game, each player gets 3 penguins, and for a 4-player game, each player receives only 2 penguins. Then, you build the ice floe. To do so, take all the tiles, shuffle them randomly together, face down, and then flip them one at a time in a 7x8 grid. You'll make them in rows, alternating 7, then 8, then 7, so on and so forth. Once you build the ice floe, you randomly determine who will be the first player. The first player takes one of his penguins and places it on any one fish space on the board. Then, in turn order, each player places the rest of his penguins. So if the red player was first, he would place a penguin, then the next player, then the next player, and then back to the red player. After all the penguins have been placed, game plays in the same turn order. On your turn, first, you'll move your penguin any number of spaces in one direction. You may not change directions as part of your move. This means that you can move in 6 different directions if you're on one of the tiles not near the edge of the board. Once you've moved your penguin, you eat the fish that you were on. This will go into your score pile face down, and it's the number of points you receive at the end of the game. You may not move your penguin through other penguins, including penguins of your own color. After you've made your move, then the next player proceeds. Once no more illegal moves can be made, then the game ends. The player with the most fish wins. If there is a tie, then one of the tied players who has taken the most tiles will win. That's how you play. Hey, that's my fish. Now that you know how to play Hey, That's My Fish, it's time that we take a look at it with our point-counterpoint review.
Because Mike and I generally agree about the game, we're going to roll to see who argues for it and who argues against it.
Correct.
If it's even, I get the pros, and if it's odd, he does. Mm-hmm. It's even.
Right.
So I'll take the argument for the game.
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you how much it should never hit the table.
Well, the first thing that struck me about the game was how it's a filler game, and with filler games you can either find short games that aren't that strategic, or slightly longer games that have some elements of strategy. This one I think finds a nice marriage between the two. It's a short and kind of fast game, and it's got a lot of hidden strategy in it that I don't think is immediately relevant.
I agree.
Apparent.
Yeah, I agree. It's a pretty meaty filler. Unlike games like Guillotine that are short but there's not much to them, or Ingenious, which is a lot of strategy but longer. This one fills a nice little niche.
Yep.
I also think that unfortunately the strategy is a little bit too interactive for an abstract like this. I don't think that's a problem. The interaction is a problem in general, but in a game such as this, I feel like it's often the deciding factor. If every player is not playing in a way that's going to get him or her a lot of fish, if every player is not playing in such a way that he's going to carve out a nice chunk of the board for himself, then one player can really exploit that to the detriment of the other one. So it's very easy to either accidentally or purposefully kingmake in this game just by not taking your fair share. If somebody gets really shut out, often 2 people can end up fighting and one person can really clean up in a 4-player game, or in a 3-player game, one person can miss an opportunity to really get into somebody else's territory, and you just end up with a situation where the winner is not really the one who played the most skillfully, but the one who got lucky enough to have somebody give them an easy opening. So it's not luck in the way we usually define it on the scale, but it's an element that's not really under your control. A lot of this game in a 3 or 4-player game only. In a 2-player game, it's high skill. A 3 or 4-player game is just not within your control. And you could be eliminated in this game, which is very unusual for a game of this kind. So not only can you play so poorly that you give somebody else an opening, you can play poorly enough that you just are pushed out of the game completely and get hardly any fish.
Which is an unfortunate truth about this particular strategy game. Yeah. You mentioned a whole bunch when you were talking about how the board interacts, that you can have these kind of elements where if one player isn't playing optimally, or however you want to put it.
Well put.
But at least that's true at all levels of the game. So it's designed for 2 to 4 players. It doesn't matter whether you're playing 2, 3, or 4 players. It's consistent across the whole arc of the spectrum that you can play it in. Right. All the strategy and the decision making, it's all the same. The only thing that really changes is the number of points you're going to get at the end.
I would argue that it changes a little bit from 2 to 3. When you're playing one-on-one, there's a little different feel. You don't have to worry about that kind of king-making aspect. Mm-hmm. But you're right that the core strategy remains the same, and I think it plays very well with all numbers. So I would agree with that pro. I will give you that one. However, what I won't give you is just how long the damn setup is. It just takes so long to put it together compared to how long the game actually takes, especially if you want it to put it together in a way that looks nice. Uh-huh. When I was doing the tutorial, I feel like I was sitting there forever, lining up the tiles just so, with just a little bit of red showing. Okay. And then if you don't line it up well, if you don't take that time, then when you're moving your penguins, it's easy to disrupt it. If you have them touching and you move a penguin off one, you're almost certainly going to interrupt the ice flow.
I do agree that the tile shifting can be a problem. I just can't say I agree with the setup problem. I mean, every game requires setup. I don't think this one is any more or less difficult than the other ones that are out there.
I'm talking by percentage, Tom.
The thing I do like most probably about this game is how accessible it is. It's such a simple game. You can teach it to anyone. They pick it up, the premise is easily understood in like one sentence. The theme is so like light and friendly that it's engaging to even people who aren't serious gamers. But there's enough strategy there that it can be engaging to people who are serious gamers.
I agree.
You can just play it with anyone. That's my favorite part of the game.
Yeah, I do agree. It's very easy to get this one to hit the table. When I was doing the tutorial, it didn't take me very many takes to get it. It was only a few minutes long. Very straightforward game, and that's to its credit.
You mean we don't do all this in one take?
Well, not always.
Oh.
But with however, as long as, as easy the game is to hit the table, it's kind of disappointing when you first open the box or when you first join the game off because there is just so much wasted space in here. This box is huge for how many actual components you have.
It all fits in these two bags.
Yes, everything fits in the two bags, plus the little rule book. All that's in the box is a gigantic insert which eats up all the space and the things we punched it out from.
Yep.
I don't know why Fantasy Flight included such a humongous box. It really hurts what would otherwise be a very portable game. You could easily throw this in just a little line bag and take it with you or something like that. And then when you do get into it, I've played the deluxe version of this game, and I think it looks really nice. It's a little more expensive, but those penguins are just really hilarious, and they're really fun to feel and move around.
They come pre-painted?
Yes. This version, while the pieces are nice, it's just a little bit of a disappointment after playing the other one, especially given the tile size. This was the most frustrating thing. Everyone has to kind of crowd around the table to get to this tiny. The tiny grid barely covered any of our luxurious table here.
It's true. It doesn't take up a whole lot of table space, and that can be a little disappointing in a strategy game.
But on the whole, what do you think of it, Tom?
Well, I'm going to have to give it a 7 out of 10. I enjoy the game. It's really well made, simple design. The thing that really gets me about it is how accessible it is and how well the theme is tied into. You don't see it a lot in strategy games. It wouldn't come up a lot. Not strategy games, abstract games.
Right.
It wouldn't come up a lot, but I think the theme really fits just how the game plays. So 7 out of 10 for me.
I agree. Just as the season wheel mechanic is simple but really drives seasons, the ice melting mechanic really does work well in this and does have a little bit of theme to it. I found your pro arguments quite persuasive, Tom, and I'm also going to give this one a 7 out of 10. It's good. It's not my favorite style of game personally. I'm an Ameritrash gamer at heart, and so this one doesn't really get me that excited, but it's really deep for how straightforward it is and for how easy it is to bring to the table, play it with grandma, play it with anybody. 7 out of 10.
Great.
I think that basically covers it for That's My Fish, except we're still going to talk more about it in the breakdown.
All right, it's time for the breakdown of Hey, That's My Fish from Fantasy Flight. That's My Fish is a filler game. It's really short. It gets 100 short. It's short. The gameplay is quick. We give it 70 fast. But analysis paralysis can set in on some of those turns, so we give it 30 slow. There's a little bit of luck involved in the initial tile placement and turn order, so we give it 15 luck and 85 skill. Hey, That's My Fish is a highly strategic game. Even those choices that seem like they might be immediate decisions have ramifications on your long-term strategy, so we give it 90 strategy, 10 tactics. It's an entirely interactive game at 100. All your decisions affect all the players at the table. Hey, That's My Fish is an abstract strategy game, so it's no surprise that we give it 90 abstraction. But it does have a solid theme on top of that game, so we give it 10 immersion. It's extremely simple to learn and teach. We gave it 100 simplicity. We give it 85 portability and 15 grandeur. The game is small and the box is a little larger than it needs to be. If you have the deluxe game, it's a little bigger and it looks a lot better. We gave it 100 completeness, and there's no reason to expand it unless you want to add sea lions or polar bears or something. On our trophy scales, we give it 3 originality. The move and collect mechanic is nothing new, but it does have a solid theme that ties into those mechanics. For value, we gave it 4 trophies. The components are just fine, and it is relatively inexpensive. If you pick up the deluxe version, it's going to get fewer trophies because it does have nicer components, but it's way more expensive. Mike gave it a 7 out of 10. Tom gave it a 7 out of 10. And that is the breakdown for Hey, That's My Fish.
We hope you enjoyed snacking on lots of delicious fish with us today in Hey, That's My Fish. Join us next week for our continuation of today's chit-chat. Next week, we'll focus on strategy and tactics as part of the breakdown. And we'll be taking a look at Race for the Galaxy, the classic tableau building game.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel for regular updates. See the links below for our Facebook and Twitter pages. And leave us a comment on what you think about That's My Fish.
See you next week.
Method actor. Mo money, mo penguins.
Steals my outtake.
Mo money, mo penguins.
Mo money, mo penguins.
Mo money, mo penguins. Mo money, mo penguins. Mo money, mo penguins.